I think I'm saying that we struggle all our lives to answer it. That it's the struggle that is important. That's what helps us to define our place in the universe.
This is Beverly, Dr. Beverly, Dr. Beverly Crusher. Honest.
Forceful.
Trusting.
Brilliant.
Strong.
And adventurous.
And this is Crusher Combo.
All right. So as Jay said, we're going to be talking about Voyager's Tuvix and my What Would Beverly Do segment. So real quick, I'm just going to do the synopsis. If anyone rarely hasn't, seen Voyager yet, but after a transporter malfunction, Tuvix and Neelix are merged into a single being. In the search for a way to restore them to their original forms, a moral dilemma is faced as the new being does not want to be terminated. So Jay, real quick, I'm curious about how do you rate this episode in Voyager terms? Do you think it's like top 10 best or it's middle of the road? As a new fan of Star Trek, I feel like I don't really have a good say in it because I'm still going through Voyager, but I know you being a huge fan, you have more of a better idea of where this might land in Voyager best list.
Well, I think Voyager is one of the series that I think the really good episodes are maybe fewer and farther between. But I think that when Voyager hits a home run, they do a really good job on that show. I don't think Tuvix would make the top 10, but I think it would get up there close. I find, I watched it when I was a kid when it aired. And I found, being older now, I think the episode hits a little different.
Right.
Seeing the way relationships with people can shift and change so fast. I think you can relate to the episode a little more when you're older than when you're 13, 12 maybe when the episode aired. 12,
right? Yeah, middle school age. Yeah
right. When you're that age, it's just that I want my characters back, so kill this guy and let's move on.
That's true. You know what? I think that's a really good point because as kids, you're looking at it as well, I don't know who this guy is, so just get rid of him and we'll go on to, back to my favorites. But as an adult, you're like, oh, this is a tough decision. You kind of look it through Janeway's eyes of how she was going to be handling it, right?
Yeah.
I did, watch the episode literally like an hour before we started, and my mom just so happened to pop in to help me give Mr. Grimbleshanks, he's doing well if anyone cares, but he was getting his antibiotics. She was helping me out, and she was watching it just like the ending part, and I was telling her about it, and she was all like, well, no, it's murder, like, unfortunately they lost those two other ones and he's now a being and he has right. Like she got really into it. So I was like, so you don't agree with Janeway? She's like, no, he had rights. She shouldn't have done that.
Listen, Star Trek, regardless of the series, does a really good job of raising those moral questions. And I think that this episode definitely does not fall short. We've all seen the Janeway was right or Janeway was wrong.
Exactly.
Hashtags and stuff, right? But I think this episode does a really good job of putting everybody's morals under a good microscope and making us take a really hard look at it.
Right. And I think too, even when I first saw it, because I just started getting into Voyager not too long ago, but when I first saw it, I was all like, oh, that's a tough one. And honestly, I still don't know if Janeway was right or wrong. I'm kind of leaning towards right because of the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. But still, it's like, ooh, that, I don't know. I'm still on the fence. Are you on the she was right or wrong category?
I can see it from both perspectives. I don't want to get too far ahead in the conversation because we'll probably break some scenes down and stuff. But I don't think it's as simple
It's
as yes or no.
Uh-huh.
I think there's more layers to it.
I think so. Yeah. I think that's my problem too. There's just too many gray areas in there to be all like, she was right, she was wrong, yes or no, which one was better. Now, I did do a poll. I had split it off on Threads and Twitter, and very interesting. So there was 27 votes on Threads and 24 votes on Twitter, and as I tallied up the percentages, 51%, and the question was, would have Beverly agreed with Janeway's decision to eliminate Tuvix and get back Neelix and Tuvok? 51% said yes, and 49% said no. So it's smack in the middle.
It's not so simple.
It's not so simple. 26 votes voted for yes, and 25 said no. So yeah, it was really just right in there. And even a couple of people, like I said, I was on Threads. One who is Doctor's Crusher on Threads, she says, I think she wouldn't. She's saying Beverly wouldn't agree. She says, I would have a great philosophical discussion with Janeway about it. She says, ultimately, a decision would be out of her hands unless she can come up with a way to clone Tuvix and then separate one of the clones. I don't think there was any other option. So I think Beverly wouldn't like it, but would accept Janeway's decision in the end. And then Trombone Tallboy from Threads had said that the most beneficial solution for all parties would be initially to make a transporter clone of Tuvix and then separate the original back to Tuvok and Neelix. Again, there was always, I think, people's ideas about how it should have been handled. But you know, even back... Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that raises the moral question of now the clone is its own living being, and now you want to separate that one. So you're creating a second Tuvix and then still killing another one. So it's
killing the clone. Yeah.
Right?
I think
the clone isn't the same it would be two different Tuvixes now.
That is true. That is true.
Maybe this one would be Nevok, which was the original.
Did you like Tuvix or did you like Nevok instead?
Tuvix has a better ring to it for sure.
A better ring to it, Mr. Tuvix. I mean, and I found it funny how in the show it was always Mr. Tuvok or Mr. Neelix, and they both. So it was still Mr. Right? I thought that was a little clever. I mean, my mom actually made a point about that even when she decided to separate the two. She's like, but what if it didn't work out? What if there was still a little bit of each? And I was all like, that's the whole discussion, right? Like, what if it didn't even work out and Tuvix was killed and it still created, these two separate beasts? So there's just so much to unpack here. But I guess we'll just go ahead and get started on the whole, what would Beverly do? I found it funny in the beginning of the episode where, it's showing Tuvix and Neelix kind of at heads. He's being annoyed by Neelix being all happy and peppy collecting these flowers. And then I think that was a good way to start off the episode because you're seeing them a little bit at odds, and then all of a sudden they're trapped, right? They're trapped in this one being. And I think even as at first when they're realizing they can't separate the two, like the doctor's all like, I don't know what to do about this. And Kes looks upset and Janeway's concerned, and everyone's all like, oh no, what to do. And even the being of Tuvix is like, okay, what do I do now? Right? Because he's kind of just, at first he feels trapped and like, I have both consciousness, but even though I have my own conscious, I still have the memories of both. And I feel like sometimes Neelix, sometimes Tuvok. So I think that would be very confusing for what happened.
Well, he's there's only an hour to tell the story, but this poor guy is now, he's not just struggling to figure out his place in the crew, but his place in the universe, right? Like,
yeah,
he's literally just come into existence as a completely new being, as a new person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I can only imagine how overwhelming all that would be to deal with, not just for him too, but for Kes and the crew and all his friends and found family that he's living with right now.
Right. And I think they did a good way of introducing that, because you could see it was really everybody. They're showing all their expressions, all their concerns. They really focus, of course, on Cass and Janeway, because that was her. Tuvix was a good friend of hers, and then Cass had the relationship with Neelix, which we're not going to get into. But the thing is just with everyone else, they've just kind of like started to get to know Neelix, really like Neelix. He had been on the ship for almost 2 years now, and they already knew who Tuvok was. And so, yeah, I'm sure it was kind of interesting for them to adjust, right? How are we going to adjust to this? And I mean, they figured it out, as it was continuing. Even Cass was starting to get to know this Tuvix, right? And get to understand him and like him in a way, not romantically, but just, like him as a human being.
Yeah, she was giving him a chance.
She was giving him a chance. They all were, even for what was it? Was it Tom and oh my gosh, okay, Harry.
Oh yeah.
Oh no, was it when they were playing pool?
Well, yeah, Chakotay and Tom. Yeah,
Chakotay and Tom. Yeah, like they were playing pool with with the guy. You know what I mean? Like they were hanging out, and they were just kind of accepting, like, this is how it's going to be. But do you find it interesting though for Janeway? Because I can't really remember if she really wanted the Doctor to keep looking, or the Doctor was doing it on himself, or they were just accepting that this is how it was going to be. I couldn't tell if Janeway was encouraging the Doctor to search for a solution, or if the Doctor just did it on his own. Because I know he reached out to Harry about the situation where he had figured it out.
Yeah, no, I think it was probably just standing orders to do whatever. I think there was a conversation that it could take a long time. At one point in the episode, it could take a long time, even years. I think they even mentioned
right,
to figure out how to reverse it. But yeah, I think the Doctor was just probably spending some spare time looking into
doing what he was programmed to do. Now, to add Beverly into this conversation, as this were to happen, do you think she would have continued to look for a way to separate the two, or just accept Tuvix automatically? As of like, I have no idea what to do at this point. We're just going to have to accept him as a being.
So I think being part of the Voyager crew from the onset and having to go through the trauma of, being thrown into the Delta Quadrant, losing half the crew, both Maquis and Starfleet side, because I don't think we can just take Beverly right from the Enterprise, throw her on Voyager, and see what she would do, because I don't think the context would be there.
That's true.
But as I'm kind of thinking about this, I keep coming back to how she handled the Hugh situation. Right? She was very much about his humanity and protecting this person and not using them as a weapon. Different situation. But we're still dealing with a being that they were going to send off to kill,
die.
Right?
Yeah.
To die, kill all these other Borg, which had
genocide.
Which had already killed thousands and thousands of Starfleet officers as well. So, not to mention colonists and whatnot. So, but and she was still against that. And then in this situation, it's just 2 lives, right? But I think when you look at it from a morality, like a crew morale perspective, right, with everything that they've been through, is losing 2 of the the biggest, 2 of the big faces on the ship,
right?
What's best for the crew and keeping them motivated to get home. I don't know. It's a lot.
It's a lot to take
It's a
in.
lot to weigh. Yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned about Hugh, because at first she was just concerned about saving his life, right? Because they were just like, "Oh, leave him to die." We're not, and she's like, "No, no, 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 I could help him." But as soon as Hugh started becoming an individual, and she was very much, well, he has rights. We can't just erase his memory. We can't just undo what we just did. He has the right to choose whether he goes back or stays, right? So I think at first she would definitely probably look into separating the two, just because that's what they were looking, they were looking at it as a transporter accident, right? Even Janeway had mentioned that. But as time went on, she might have really gotten to know Tuvix and seen him as an individual and not even think twice about.
Well, and I think even like you don't see the Doctor have any real interaction with Tuvix,
Right.
but the minute Tuvix is like, I don't want to do this, I don't want to die, then he just says, no, I can't in good
Yeah.
conscience go through with this, because this
Yeah.
person is telling, they're not providing consent for this,
They're not behind. Yeah.
right?
Exactly. Yeah. So it became murder at the
So
end, a little bit. How do you feel though with the Kess part of the story?
I think, you know what, as problematic as Kess is as a character, and
Yeah.
won't even
And even
talk
just
about,
with Neelix. Yeah.
yeah. I think that Jennifer Leon actually performed some pretty good scenes in this episode, because
Yeah.
you know that it's closer to the end of the episode where she is it to Janeway, she goes and she's like crying and she's like, I can't do this, I've tried. And I thought that was really well done. But I think that you could see the hurt with Cass.
Right.
And I think they were trying to portray, it's not Tuvix's fault that this has happened. So
Yeah.
I think you saw Cass really trying to internalize it as much as possible up until the end, where she kind of had a bit of a breakdown.
Yeah.
But I'm watching this and I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of somebody that, this person that you're in love with just had this happen and they don't really exist anymore. Basically, they
Yeah.
died, right? And I think it would be really hard
Right.
to go through, and especially, this Tuvix is a walking reminder of what she's lost,
What she's lost. Yeah.
right?
No, that's true. And you know what? Also, what would I saw very hard was the fact that Tuvix, because he carried Neelix's love for her, he kept talking to her as if he was Neelix, but it wasn't.
Yeah,
Right?
he was pushing the boundaries a lot. He did
Oh,
step
yeah.
back at one point,
Mm-hmm.
but he was definitely, and I get it. It'd be confusing for him, and he's got to learn those boundaries. But
Right.
from Kess's perspective, obviously, it would be
Right.
extremely difficult.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, because you mentioned at the end where she had that breakdown, I think what kind of broke the camel's back was because Tuvix went to her like, the one person that would understand and tell Janeway that, she shouldn't do this is you, right? And he's like begging her to like tell her to keep me alive. But she couldn't in good conscience do that. She even said to Janeway, I like Tuvix. Like she grew to care for him as a friend. She's all like, but I miss Neelix. I want
Yeah,
Neelix back. If there
yeah,
was a way, like for instance, if there was, a way to bring my husband back from the dead, probably gonna do it, and you're thinking selfishly in that moment because you love someone and you want to bring him back. So yeah,
I think going to Kess was Tuvok's like big mistake.
downfall.
That was
Yeah,
once he did that, because I think it was that plea from Kess, which really changed Janeway's.
Janeway's decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, because she even had mentioned when the Doctor had figured out how to separate the two, she goes to Chakotay and she's all like, when did he become an individual instead of a transporter accident? Like, when did we shift? Because it had been weeks late. They said weeks later, which could have been at least like a couple months, right? 2 to 3 months. And they started to get used to the fact this is how it's going to be. But then all of a sudden, oh, there's this chance to bring back Tuvok and Neelix. And then their feelings for Tuvix kind of shifted. I think that's where Beverly would be all like, whoa, 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 wait a second. But what about his feelings? Like, what about his thoughts? Like, I think they were so wrapped up in their own feelings about their loss, especially for Janeway, because she knew Tuvok for a very long time. They weren't thinking about Tuvix as much. It was part of the dilemma, but ultimately it wasn't enough to sway Janeway that direction, right?
Well, that was, to me, I think that, Janeway gets a lot of slack for this episode. But to me, I think that honestly, let's say worst reaction was how cold Tom and Chakotay were on the bridge when Tuvok is giving his big "I don't want to die" speech, and they just shut him out. It's like, literally 4 minutes ago you were playing pool in France, and now you're here talking about murdering me, right? Like, and that's where I said, at the beginning, when I said that, as you get older and you start seeing how people's relationships with each other can change, sometimes on a dime, I think that does a good job of capturing that, where all of a sudden, you're really close to somebody and then you wake up one morning and you're not, right? And it happens to all of us. It's life. But that scene to me was really powerful. And you know what? And Janeway is not, you see all the Tuvix memes with, she'll kill them, murder them, or whatever.
Right.
But like, you see it on her face that this is not, she doesn't want to be in this position to have to make this decision.
You saw as she entered the bridge, like, she looked totally distraught and she had to put on the captain's mask of, I have a duty, right? I have a job to do and I'm not going to let my emotions get in the way. And she held that all the way up until after she left sickbay.
That walk down the corridor, you see the mask drop and you see
completely.
Kate Mulgrew.
Oh, absolutely! It was brilliant. I told that to my mom.
Face acting, right? Your face acting. You like
I told my mom that. I was all like, "Look at it, though." I was like, because she was like, "Why would she do that?" I was like, "But it still affected her. It probably still haunts her to this day." Yeah.
Now, if Voyager was structured better as a series, it would have been nice to see her deal with that. But Voyager hit the reset button at the end of every episode.
That is true. Yeah. I mean, they were getting a little bit better with TNG as they were doing with Picard's trauma with the Borg and stuff. But not too much happened on Voyager in that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, it got a little better once Seven was introduced and you were dealing with her growth as a person, right? Because the other characters, you don't see a whole lot of character growth with them, but with Seven, there's
there was a lot of potential.
Like it's a data journey, right? That towards humanity and stuff, right? So, but also at that point, they're seeing the success of Deep Space Nine and the Dominion War and that serialized storytelling. So I think they were trying to work it a little bit in there, but
no, I understand that. I mean, the little crossover of how everything overlapped. They were trying to just continue the story, but in different sections, which I think was a good idea. But in this instance, it would have been nice if there was a story down the road. I can't think of a storyline off the top of my head that she was reminded of Tuvix, right? And just had that little hint that it was still bothering her. Or even as the Doctor became more in tune with his emotions and being more an individual.
We should have got a Revenge of Tuvix episode where the accident happened again, but now he's out to murder.
He's going after the Revenge of the Tuvix.
Tuvix Judgment Day.
Oh my gosh, that would have been hilarious. Now, the actor that played Tuvix, is it Tom Wright?
Tom Wright. Nailed
Okay.
it. He nailed it.
He was brilliant as just a perfect meld of Tuvok and Neelix. Like just playing those two, it was fantastic because you can see him in the very beginning when he first became Tuvix. You see him shift as Neelix and Tuvok, right? And as time went on, you're kind of seeing him more of a like he's logical, but with a little sense of humor. Right? Almost kind of
Right.
like Data with an emotion chip, right? It's like they kind of he did so well of meshing those two characters together. And I would suggest that during the Hollywood Food Coalition benefit, the Sci-Fi Sisters had done an interview, had talked about Tuvix, and they had Tom Wright on there and talked about, you know, how he portrayed the character, how, you know, was she right, was she wrong, those things. It's a really good interview, and I totally suggest everyone watching it. But, you know, I had mentioned this earlier to you, and since we're kind of on the Janeway thing here, gender roles. Okay. Do you think that fans would have had such a split of she was wrong, she was right, if it was a male captain?
So yeah, I think you and I talked about this
We did.
on a Twitter space when I was driving home from St. Louis.
When
I
you're
think
driving home, trying to keep you
you
awake.
were
Yeah.
keeping me awake on my almost 12-hour drive.
Yeah.
Yes, we did have a conversation, and I think I personally believe that it would have been a lot more forgiving had it been Ben Sisko
Mm-hmm. Or
that made
Picard.
the decision.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean,
mean,
I
Cisco
think
poisoned an entire planet, and people go, right?
like, whatever.
He's justified. Well, I mean, when you have to factor, like I said, that crew morale thing,
Mm-hmm.
the trauma of being home, you know, all of them having lost all their families, and now they're talking about two more people that they love that they've been spending at this point, what, at least a year and a half
Yeah.
with, right? And they've been through, you know, everything that a starship crew in the Delta Quadrant would go through. So they're
Right.
family. These are brothers and sisters, right? So
Yeah.
I think that you have to keep looking at it that perspective, and not just they're just two characters on a TV show. You have to look at the bigger picture. But
The
I
bigger
do
picture.
think the narrative around if Janeway was right or wrong probably wouldn't exist if it was Cisco.
Mm-hmm. No, that I agree. And I only say that just because as I had always heard the negativity that was always towards Star Trek Discovery, especially against Michael Burnham and, you know, Soneqa's character and all that stuff. And I hadn't watched Discovery yet because I was trying to go in order, and that didn't work. So I've been flip-flopping different Star Treks. But I had just seen the premiere of season 5, and I thought it was great. I loved it. I was like, I don't know why people hate this show. I think it's awesome.
Listen, I don't want to spoil anything, but this season,
It's
really, I love this whole we're going on a quest storyline. It doesn't feel like a big destroy the unit. I mean, it can, but it doesn't feel like a
right.
big, you know, big threat blowing up. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's not Species 10C trying to mine the galaxy and blow up planets. This
Yeah.
could have potential down the line, but it's more the quest and the stuff. We're getting great character moments this season. I don't want to go too much on a tangent because I'm really
No,
enjoying this season, but
no, I've heard great things about. I didn't continue. I was actually going to go back and like watch. Was it Janal? I think it was episode 3 or something like that. But I thought these characters
yes,
were
Wilson
great.
Cruz. That episode.
I heard he does a great job.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And I've heard a lot of negativity towards Michael's, you know, the character because, you know, oh, she showed too much of emotion. You know, the captain shouldn't do that, right? Which is funny because in Janeway's situation, she had emotion. She put on the captain's mask, did her job, and then she, you know, let out those emotions once she got away from her crew. But honestly, we've seen those emotions from all the male captains, right? Like in some shape or form. So when I was talking about it with this, I was all like, if this was a male captain, no one would have batted an eye, but the fact that she was female, I think they caused more of a, how dare she, it's so annoying. It's so annoying. And here's the thing. I mean, and I've heard even the same things sometimes with Beverly, oh, female CMO, she's no bones. No, she's not bones. And she's not trying to be, she's her own person and she did a damn good job. So that's just how I feel about it. But I think one thing too, if Janeway was starting to question whether she should separate, like she was doing with Chakotay. Let's take Chakotay out of that and put Beverly in that situation. I'm curious about how your thoughts would be if what kind of, I think was a Doctor's Crusher from Threads had put like a philosophical discussion, right, of how to proceed with this. Now, some people had said, well, they would clone Tuvix and keep the clone and then separate the original, right? Not sure if that really causes a solution in all of it, but I'm wondering, I could see Beverly sitting down with her and giving her the pros and cons of the whole situation.
Yeah, and you know what? The other thing, just real quick to mention, I think too that's important is that the moral side of the discussion on the show suffers a bit because the Doctor's confined to sick bay still, right? So he's not out doing one-on-one with people like Beverly would be, hunting people down and trying to talk them out of, speak up for this person and whatever. Where the Doctor's just kind of, they got to come to him, and if they're not coming to him, he's calling them on the emergency medical hologram channel.
Yeah. Now, for a second, take Beverly out of the equation and put the Doctor in, because later on the Doctor becomes more of an individual,
so
right?
If he had his hollow emitter,
yeah. How do you think his reaction would it have changed? Do you think it would have changed if he would have gotten to know Tuvix outside of sickbay? Or would he still follow the?
I still think he would have reacted the same way. I just think he would have had a bigger impact on the crew into him, right? Because he stepped away at the end and said, "I can't do this," right? And I think that was a good moment to see that he's got those ethical. It's not just subroutines, but it's he had ethics as well, right? But I think that had he been able to walk around and talk to everybody, I think he would have probably swayed some people, because there was really no one fighting for Tuvix the entire episode.
No.
Just Tuvix.
Which
is also frustrating, because we've all been in those situations where we're trying to advocate for ourselves and nobody's listening, and you feel like you're shouting into the void, right? Which is like, I mean, I think it was good that they had that scene on the bridge, because it's such a big space, right? And he felt so alone standing in the middle of it with everybody just not even responding to him.
I loved when he said, and I'm going to totally botch this, but I remember he said something of that he felt sorry for everyone that was allowing this because they were good people. And even though he knew they were going to murder him, basically, he still saw them as good people.
Yeah.
And I really thought that Harry wasn't in there. He was in sickbay, but even Chakotay, like, kind of being all like, I mean, I think they did facial expressions, but to me, it wasn't enough to really cause a, like, they're hurting with this decision, but they're going to be listening to the captain. But I really liked that line, because he still cared for them, even though they were about to destroy him. Right. But I think in Beverly's case, she would have been there probably advocating for him. She would have been the only one standing up. And like Doctor's Crusher had mentioned, but it would have been out of her hands.
Yeah.
It was not going to be her decision, with it. And even in that case, I would wonder if, it was out of her hands. She didn't do it. She had the captain do it, just like the doctor did. How that would have affected Beverly after the fact, right?
Yeah.
Thinking maybe I should have done something, or I should have stopped them, or something. I don't know. I feel like Beverly always had those. Her moral compass is very up there, is very high, which is why her scene in was it Dominion in Picard, where she's all like, I think of losing my compass. That's a big deal. That's a very big deal for Beverly Crusher. If she's all like, let's go kill this person because I'm sick and tired of her chasing and trying to kill her son. She had a good reason, but that's a big deal for this character because that just means she went through so much. Her moral compass was dissipating, right? Now it's so funny because I guess I asked for this over a year ago and I didn't realize it, but Chris from Shelf Nerds, who does microchecks, I had asked him to do a TNG version of Tuvix. Okay. And he likes to do his little one-shot stories of scenes that we don't get to see, or our own, thoughts of like this, of what would Beverly do in this situation. And I thought what he did was actually very, very clever. So I'm going to read this real fast. Have you read this yet? I'm not sure.
Not this one. I know he's done a few on Tuvix. I did see the one where he did. It was like a follow-up interview with Neelix and Tuvok with Starfleet. On what their thoughts on the situation were, and it was well done. It was well done.
He does a really good job. So in this sense, I'm just going to read the story as I would read, a fanfic. So he says, Picard walks from his ready room onto the bridge and up the engineering station. Mr. Jorley, Picard says quietly. Jorley turns from the console. Yes, Captain. Will you accompany me to sickbay? Picard asks, and Jorley's eyes widen. I think, sir, that everyone should know what we're about to do, Jorley announces to the bridge. Worf, Data, and the other bridge crew look back at him. Jorley approaches Worf. Worf, my safety is being threatened. As chief of security, are you going to let... And he stops. Jorley pauses, noticing the Klingon's resolve in Worf's eyes. No, you wouldn't disobey the captain, would you? Jorley says. He then moves down to the bridge to Data. You, Data! Geordi's best friend, Jorley desperately says. Are you going to let this happen? I admit that I find my ethical program in conflict with my desire to resume my friendship with Geordi, Data states. Jorley pounds his chest. I am Geordi and more. I do not require more, Data says. Jorley whips around to Troy. Counselor, surely you can sense my terror, my desperation to live. Troy's eyes well, her brow and lip twist with heartbreak. Yes, I can. Then how can you? Jorley asks before being cut off by Riker. That's enough. Jorley turns around, searching the eyes of the crew. Picard glares on from the back turbo lift with a calm detachment. I'm just a kid, Jorley cries. Will you murder a child? Troy folds into Riker's chest. Mr. Jorley, Picard commands. Now, I will stop for a second. For some reason, I didn't catch the kid part. And when they were saying Jorley, I thought he did Geordi and Barclay, which I thought would have been interesting. But Barclay wasn't a very important. Not saying he wasn't important, but it would have been like, Barclay, whatever. But he says, Jorley's mouth hangs open, then closes stiffly. He joins Picard in the turbo lift. To seek out new life, Jorley says. The turbo lift doors shut. Jorley and Picard enter sickbay. Beverly and Ogawa stand by the center biobed. Doctor, Picard says. Mom, Jorley shouts out. You won't let him. Beverly grips the cushion of the biobed to steady herself as tears well her eyes. My son's name is Wesley. But, Jean-Luc, I cannot do this, Beverly says. Picard searches her eyes. Very well, Doctor. He extends his hand to her. Beverly. She cautiously presses a hyperspray into his palm. His other hand rubs at her arm firmly. He nods. She nods as her lip quivers. Picard turns to Jorley. Mr. Jorley, please sit down. He mentions for a bio bed. Jorley stares at Beverly, walks over and sits on top of it. He then looks away from Beverly. Alyssa curls her arm around Beverly's back. Picard locks eyes with Jorley and presses the hyperspray in his neck. She must have her child back, Picard whispers to him. Picard turns and approaches the medical console. He puts commands. Jorley dissolves within a beam and Wesley and Geordi appear. Mom, Wesley calls confused. Oh, Wesley, Beverly says, embracing him in a tight hug. Alyssa begins scanning Geordi with the tricorder. Captain? Geordi asks. The last thing I remember is beaming back from Mr. LaForge, Picard says. We have been tested time and time again on our voyages through the unknown, but not like this. I'm a man who always believed that I would never trade one life for another while in command of a starship. He approaches the door. If you'll excuse me. I must consider just who, Picard pauses. He pulls a smile upon his face. It's good to have you both back. He leaves promptly. The others watch in silence as the doors shut. So I thought it was brilliant that Chris used Wesley in this part because as much as she wanted her son back, he was putting her, she's like, but I cannot do this as a doctor, separate the two, but she allowed Picard to do it because she wanted her son back. So I felt that was an interesting twist in that sense, right? But even as I had said earlier, if there was some way to bring like my husband back from the dead, I was going to do it, especially if my daughter was. But then again, I'm not a doctor. I'm being selfish. I'm like, I want my kid back, right? I can't really, say I would not trade my child's life over this being. But I liked Chris's twist on that aspect because he still put her on there.
When did he write that for you?
I think he wrote that. Let me double check real fast. I wanted to say it was like a year ago.
Like pre
April 12th,
season
2023. So April 12th, 2023. So yeah, just at the end of season 3.
Okay. I was going to say, because like, I feel like Picard era Beverly Crusher would be like, where's the button to hit to separate?
That's true. Her moral compass is out the window.
Yeah. Because she's been through some shit, right? So
a little bit. Yeah. But this Beverly hadn't been through that shit yet. So she was all like, but I don't know. I feel like her ethical dilemma would be, I want my son back, but I can't like physically murder this person who's begging me to stay alive.
I mean, that's great. That was great.
Yeah.
It was a great take on it. I mean, but her stakes were higher than just with a Neelix, right? Her stakes in this were the same as like Kess's, right? Or even Janeway, because Janeway and Tuvok were, they were besties. So,
yeah,
for the Doctor to have the skin in the game like that, I think certainly creates a whole different layer of things to consider, right?
Of what would Beverly do? Perfect timing.
Murdering the hell out of what's his name? Jorley.
Jorley. Yeah, that's why I thought at first he had done Barclay, and I was all like, well, people have been like, but they would want Geordi back, right?
Well, people, why? Can we separate them, but just get Geordi back?
Barclay could stay in the transporter, but he's fine. He'll stay with those creatures.
If this had happened after the event where Barclay becomes part of the computer and takes over the ship and stuff, then people would be like,
just go. Yeah.
Just eject him. Just beam him into space. Bring Geordi back. There we go.
Pretty much.
Like, we don't know what happened. I'm just kidding. I love Geordi. I love Barclay. He's a great character. I wish we saw more of him after First Contact, because his scene with Zefram Cochrane was great.
Right.
But we never saw him again.
No.
Voyager.
He was on Voyager.
He was in Voyager, yeah.
Yeah. 2 episodes?
He was big on getting them home. I don't know how we both forgot that. We're only talking.
He was
Voyager.
very big on getting him home. Yeah. That was it was his whole thing.
Good
And of
job.
course
Good job.
good job, Barkley. Yeah. So sorry that we're wanting to throw you out of an airlock. But the thing
How memorable his character can be.
all I'm thinking of is Barkley as a spider. That's where my mind went.
That was terrifying. That scared the
That was
hell out of me
terrifying.
when I was a
It
kid.
did. I wish we got to get what Gates wanted to do. Do you know what she wanted to do? Do you remember?
This sounds familiar. What is
So he in the episode he just pops up right on the glass and scares the crap out of Sloth Picard. And but no, originally she actually wanted to have him dangling down from the warp core coming down like this. I was like, oh, that would have been so cool.
There was budget constraints and stuff, right? I think
an earthquake happened, and so they were kind of pressed for time.
Right.
Northridge just had to ruin everything. But no,
we almost got like Spider-Man Barkley. That would have been cool.
That would have been so cool. Who would have kissed him upside down though? That's going a whole other direction.
Not Deanna, that's for sure.
Not Deanna. Nope. No, I mean she was a lizard though. Maybe she would try to eat him.
Maybe.
She was some kind of amphibian or something. She would probably try to eat him. Worf's going after her and she's going after Barkley. No, we're totally going off topic. That was funny though. That next micro trek is going to be that. So, but anyways,
yes,
I mean,
Chris, if you're watching, we want Spider-Man Barkley. We need to know who's kissing in the rain.
Who's going to be doing the upside down famous kiss?
Yeah.
No, but I think overall in this aspect with Beverly, I think she would, as you mentioned, she definitely would have fought for Tuvix. But ultimately it would have been out of her hands. But I think it would have bothered her in a sense after the fact.
Yeah.
It's not like she could have stopped Janeway. It wasn't like it would be her fault.
No, she only, I mean, unless you want to commit mutiny, right? There's not much, just because of like she only had, the authority to remove him from command if he was mentally or physically incapable of performing their duty, right? So just because she doesn't agree with something, she can't. There's not much you can do.
She can't do very much. I mean, and we saw it in TNG where, her and Picard did butt heads over the Prime Directive and the do no harm. So I think in this aspect, it just would have been the same thing. She would say her piece and she would let her know, this is how I feel. And I'm going to tell you you're wrong, but ultimately just give in.
Now had Picard's outcome with Hugh or his decision been different, do you think that she would have done what the doctor did and just stepped aside and went, I can't do it, somebody else needs to do it? Or do you think she would just follow orders and do what she was told? Since we're talking these dilemmas, I think it's a similar.
It is a similar. I think because I mean, originally that's what she was doing. She was following orders, helping Geordi, even though she didn't like it.
Yeah, she was just speaking out.
She was just speaking out of like, I'm helping you, but I don't have to like it. She was just like, I don't have to agree with you, but I'm just doing what I'm told.
There will be nasty words in my personal log. That's
pretty much. Now, the difference was, though, this was before Hugh really was an individual, right? That's what changed it up a little bit later, even for Geordi, because she was pressing on of like, let's call him this. And, he created Hugh and all that stuff. And that's when she's like, oh, well, he's an individual. If she would have probably noticed that he was more of an individual than just a Borg piece of the puzzle, right? She might have been a little bit more apprehensive at that point and been like, I'm stopping. I can't do this. They can continue and do it, right? It wasn't, but I think she might have had more reservations. But by this point in the episode, of course, everyone started to have reservations. And so she had more support. In this sense, in the very beginning, though, she originally did it. So she was kind of like Tuvix, where no one was listening and was just doing it anyways. So, but, because of her apprehension, it ended up tipping in her favor and she got what she wanted. Do you think there was another solution for the Tuvix situation besides cloning? Besides the typical.
Well, I mean, like, look, the cloning idea is outside the box for sure. I'm not a fan just because of what I said earlier. You're now creating another being, which is also
Right.
self-aware and an individual, and then you're killing that one anyways. So,
Right.
I don't know. I don't know. This is an episode. I mean, every Trekkie's aware of this episode. Every Trekkie's thought about this episode, and it doesn't matter how hard I think about it. I can't come up with a different solution. It's hard, you know.
But even not even just a solution, but I mean, it was literally split down the middle of my poll of was she right? You know, was she have agreed or was she not have agreed? In the sense of was Janeway right or wrong? You know, and that's
so you said you combined the two polls. When you have them separate, is there more of a lead for one over the other?
Yes. Or? So on Threads, 44% had said yes, Beverly would have agreed, and then 56 had said no.
So it's Twitter people want to murder the hell out of Tuvix.
It was 58% yes, she would agree, and then 42 had said no. So yeah, it was again.
Dark. Twitter is dark.
Twitter hasn't been the same. The moment they murdered the bird, it's not been the same, you know. But no, it was a split. Even with Threads, it was like, yes, she would, no, she wouldn't, and back and forth. So I mean, even to this day, no matter who I had talked to after I had seen Tuvix for the first time, I was getting multiple different responses to it. Oh, Janeway was right. Janeway was wrong, but she did this, but she should have done this, you know? And it was like, I was almost like, okay, guys, it's just an episode. But because people would still get heated even 30 plus years later of this is how impactful this episode was, right? And
right.
Like, Star Trek is very good about bringing up these moral dilemmas. And then in this situation, we still don't have like a right or wrong answer, which I think that was the point. But 30 years later, and people are still talking about it. You mentioned Tuvix, and everyone starts taking off with it. Oh yeah,
I think even people that haven't seen Voyager, I think you knew of Tuvix long before doing a watch of Voyager, right? So everybody knows the dilemma. But
the dilemma,
it's like I said, you either get the yes, the no, or you get people that are just like, don't know.
I'm in the I'm the I don't know. My mama was dead set on the like, how dare she? She was very upset. Tuvix had rights. She was just going really on that bandwagon. But Janeway even mentioned, well, what about Tuvix's rights? What about Neelix? I need to speak for them. I'm their voice, you know? And I was all like, oh man, whoever wrote this, I got to see who did write this. Because this was just absolutely insane. So the teleplay was by Kenneth Biller. And the story was by Andrew Shepard Price and Mark Gaberman. And it was directed by Cliff Boyle, who we've seen a bunch of times in TNG. So kudos to all of them, because it was definitely a roller coaster. A roller coaster ride for sure.
Like I said earlier, Voyager, their great episodes aren't as many as some of the other series, and I'm not trying to diss Voyager. I'm a Voyager fan, love Voyager. I watched it a few times, but I think that Tuvix for sure is probably top tier Star Trek storytelling, right?
Oh yeah,
that's what Star Trek does is makes you uncomfortable, makes you look at these things under the microscope and start these debates, right?
Yeah.
It's where it shines,
right? And if we could still have a conversation even after all these years, and they did something good, right? I mean, we had mentioned about what Cisco had done, right? Or even Picard with, you know, Iborg, and even Measure of a Man, right? Like those are those conversations of rights and, who was wrong, who was right, and all that stuff. So yeah, and I mean, and that's probably why I became such a big Star Trek fan, because it was, well, for one, the fandom drama is totally different than Star Wars. I still love my Star Wars, but man, just either enjoy it or don't enjoy it. Like I can't.
Yeah. I'm mutuals with somebody that's big in the Star Wars fandom.
Are you?
You've probably seen me interact with him a few times, Cody, if you ever watch this.
You're like, hello.
But
Hello.
he's stepped away sometimes from the Star Wars just because
You
it
have
gets so
to.
ridiculous. Yeah.
It gets a little much. Yeah. I mean, I think that was kind of my thing too. So with Star Trek, I'm like, I'm headed this direction. But of course the ideas of Star Trek were totally different from Star Wars. Star Wars is just very depressing. It's just like wars, domination, let's destroy a planet and kill millions of people and not bat an eye. Here at least there's like I said, moral dilemma discussions, better hope for a better future. Like that's important.
Well, I think with Star Wars, it's more, yeah, there's aliens, but at the end of the day, it's really humanity doing it to itself versus,
Right.
The Borg or the Romulans or the Klingons,
Yeah.
things that we
sure.
can picture as bad because they don't look like us, they don't sound like us.
Yeah. No, it's very, very true. That's true.
Which I think is why Darth Vader ended up in that, so that you could picture him as a villain, because he was just, in 1979, if he was just a regular guy in a black cape.
Probably wouldn't believe it as much.
Right? Yeah.
That guy.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, now now that I'm thinking about it, seeing Hayden Christensen out of suit as Darth Vader would be cool too.
No,
There's fan fiction.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. But no, I think too, in this doubling back with Beverly, I think also, as Chris had mentioned, if there was different versions of it, like if it had to do with Wesley or even Jack or even Picard, what if Picard was merged? Would she be able to make that decision? Yeah, I think this was a very good episode on the What Would Beverly Do segment. I'm really trying to look into different Star Trek episodes that really impacted people. I had asked a while back for people to tell me their favorite funny episode, controversial, just all those different things. And I'm just going to kind of name a few here. So it was like, is there is there no truth in no beauty? Is there truth in no beauty? That's the one that has Diana Mulder in it. The Cisco Eddington arc, In the Pale Moonlight, Trials and Tribulations, Dominion War, which I know the Enterprise was part of that, but we didn't see it, which kind of sucks. Charades from Strange New Worlds, Those Old Scientists. There was just a bunch of where people were like, Duet. That's a very good DS9 episode, because Beverly was such a very important character to Star Trek, in my opinion, that she had the best of what Star Trek is, right? She understood that she had that hope for a better future. She had those moral dilemmas, and she always put others before herself, right? So I think those were she definitely represents Star Trek in the best way possible, which is why I do this, because I love Beverly Crusher. So as we wrap up, do you have any last things you want to say, Jay, about anything that you're planning on doing, where they can find you? Twitter?
Well, you've added me in all these tweets, so I think everybody knows where to find me
right
on Twitter. I don't know. I don't know if there's anything we missed. Just some great acting in this episode.
Yeah,
I think we've covered everything. I said that the one really that to me that was the most chilling was Chakotay and Paris's reaction during his plea for help on the bridge, and they just, we were just playing pool with you, and now we're just shut down. We're not even swayed. Like, they just looked like they were so cold, right? So
they were.
Yeah.
I was a little surprised by their reaction. Yeah. Maybe they weren't, as much as Chakotay did say, I'm among those friends of Tuvix. Maybe in reality, or more for Tom,
they were just words.
Close.
They were just words.
Yeah, they weren't as close. I think Kes was giving, Tuvix more of the benefit of the doubt than they probably were. Like, they were just like, well, we have to accept it instead of actually accepting it. Right.
Yeah.
But it was also season 2, and they have their own arc, though Chakotay's didn't really have one. I feel like it was just kind of the same the whole way. But Tom grew. Tom did a good job.
You know what's funny is that when I went to actually rewatch this episode, I forgot it was so early in the series. I forgot it was. I was looking, I think, season 3, at the end of season 3, I was looking forward and into season 4, and I'm like, no, because Kes was there. So it was early on. It was probably one of their, I think, their first really solid episodes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, look, we're still talking about it.
We're still talking about it. Yeah. So. We're talking about it between different Star Trek shows and merging together. Look at us. But when I was looking for it, I knew it was in season 2, but I thought it was a little bit more in the beginning. So I was the opposite. And then I realized it was nearing the end of season 2, almost season 3. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. It was a really good end to the season, wanting people to watch and giving out that kind of type of story. But
well, I mean, Threads doesn't think it was such a good ending, but Twitter.
I know it's back and forth, right? And I think it's murder like that till the end of time.
Murder Twitter. Thought it was great.
Murder Twitter. Yeah, exactly. I know. I thought that was funny. Like, yeah, Beverly would have been fine with it. Like, they were just like, it's fine. I was like, I don't think so. But anyways, well, I thank you, Jay, for joining me and talking about Voyager. I appreciate you very, very much. You've been awesome. Love hanging out with you on Twitter.
Yes, thank you. Anytime.
Talking about Star Trek. So like I said, I like to do more of this stuff, and not sure what I'm going to do next, but I'll definitely post it on my Instagram page, and hopefully you guys are enjoying my videos that I've been posting. Those have been lots of fun. It's my therapy. I just love creating. That's just how it is. But until next time, guys, thanks for watching, and until next time. So bye.
Bye.
Crusher out.